And thank you, Judge, for taking time to talk with us. So I started off, I'd ask everyone this. Tell us, when we go back to your law beginnings, can you tell us what made you decide to become an attorney? And tell us about your time in law school.
I got real interested in government and politics as a young kid, even before high school, and interacted with a lot of lawyers. But I was going to be a journalist. I wasn't going to be a lawyer. So that's sort of the avenue I pursued. And I worked for Governor Hunt in all four administrations part of the time, but during his campaign the first time in 1976, and shortly, and after that I worked for him in policy development, that kind of stuff. And I interacted with the General Assembly a lot, and I sort of realized that you get a lot more done as a lawyer. You have more instant credibility with people. But the opportunity really kind of wasn't there for me at that point until a little bit later, and I decided that I would go to night school. I had some friends who had gone to George Washington at night, and so I decided I would look for a night school. The only night school between D.C. and Atlanta was North Carolina Central at that time. Judge Leonard, bless his heart, has devised a way for people to go at odd hours now, but at that time it was the only way to do it at night. So I went to night school, and that was interesting because most everybody in my class were my age and or older. Many of them had masters, and we had a doctor or two. It was an interesting group of people. You think about law school being a great place to network, but these people already had networks, and as a group, we really hadn't stayed together very much. But it was very interesting to do it at night, and do your reading while you're doing your laundry and things like that. It was great fun.
And what year did you finish law school?
1990.
90. Now take us through your career from there.
Well, I worked for the DA, the district attorney in Wake County, while I was in law school. I ran his campaign, his first campaign, in which he beat a several-term incumbent, and he wanted me to run the office, so I decided I'd do that. And then I asked him about what he thought about me going to law school, and he was all for it. So I browbeat Mark Morris, who was the dean of the evening program at the time, and to let me in. So that's how I got started. But I prosecuted for where I was at the DA's office for 6.5 years. I prosecuted before I was sworn in as a lawyer because you could practice if you went to night school. Since it was a 4-year program, you could practice after your second year. So I had 2 years of experience in court when I graduated from law school. But I went to a small practice after I left the DA's office. I left that small practice, in which I did probably 60-40 criminal, civil litigation. I left there and went back to the governor's office to be Governor Hunt's legal counsel. I did that for the end of that third term and the start of the fourth term, when the governor asked me if I would fill a spot on the Utilities Commission, which I did for 4 years. I did that. Then I went to a big firm. I think big firms are wonderful, but for me, it was the longest 16 months of my life. But I learned a lot, met some great people. Then I went in a solo practice and did that until I got appointed to the bench by Governor Easley. And I've been on the bench ever since. I had a little break because you have to, when you retire, you have to wait a certain amount of time before you can become an emergency judge. So during that, I went back to the DA's office to do a little project for the DA, Mr. Willoughby, and who's my best friend, and that was fun. And now I do emergency judging, and which has been extraordinarily interesting as well. I mean, I can go to court for a half a day, or I can do a 12-week trial, which I did last summer. So that's been fun.
Is it excuse me, for emergency judgeship, is that mostly criminal, or do you have civil cases as well?
No, it's not. It's a lot of civil too, and there's probably more criminal because there's more criminal court going than that civil court in North Carolina. But it's, for me, the 12-week trial I did was civil. It was a medical malpractice case. But last summer, thank goodness I didn't have this summer taken up. But it taught me a lot.
So, talk to us about the changes in the profession that you've seen over your years from 1990 now into 2020.
Well, even before then, because when I was working for the governor from 1976 on, it was my areas of responsibility and policy were criminal justice and public education, economic development, things like that. And so you're always interacting with lawyers. I've spent a good part of the first year working with former Justice Phil Carlton in coming up with a new Department of Crime Control and Public Safety. And that was one of the things that kind of made me see that people would give you more credibility that you knew what you're talking about criminal justice if you were a lawyer than if you weren't. But the changes I've seen since 1976 mirror the changes that have taken place in Raleigh. I mean, the growth in the bar, but the increase in its diversity has been a big change. The acceptance of people in positions of authority that wouldn't have traditionally been accepted in that has increased dramatically. I think it's more just now. And the growth of this bar association has been, along with the growth of the bar, it's been phenomenal. It's such a good organization to be a part of.
And talk about technology-wise.
Technology.
Shape really for the legal profession.
Oh, absolutely. The technology is my first official act in January of 1987 after Colin Wilby was elected was to throw away the carbon paper in the office. There were no computers. There were typewriters. And they made duplicates with carbon paper of every legal form they had. The previous administrator in the office wouldn't let them use the copier unless they had some sort of special deal. So we threw away the carbon paper first day. We started working on, I had, by that time, I had a little computer that I could do word processing on. So we started trying to find ways to get that kind of technology into the courtroom. We've had one courtroom in the Wake County Courthouse that got wired for sound with motion detector or voice activated cameras. So that was unheard of. It didn't make the court reporters all that happy because they'd have to transcribe those recordings sometimes. But and then it's just exploded. I mean, how the information available to mankind this is doubles and triples in year to year. It's completely unlike anything anybody had ever experienced. But getting computerized was a big part of being a lot more efficient. It also was we had the Wake County got sued for overcrowding in the jail, and so in an effort to help them on Thursdays, we would go to the jail, and the roster of people were on 3x5 index cards in a box. So we would go through the box and pull out the ones that had low bonds or very, like begging or public drunkenness and stuff like that. And so we would give them a chance to come into court on Fridays, and most of the time they'd plead guilty and get out for the weekend. So one of the funniest things that ever happened was one of our former district court judges, who was one of our best ones ever, a guy named Fred Morlock, whom I'm sure you know. Fred bet one of our street people $20 one Friday that if we let him out, he would be back before Monday. And he said, "I'll take that bet, Your Honor." And on Monday morning at 9 o'clock when court opened, he walked into the courtroom, walked up to the bench, collected $20 from Fred Morlock. And then he was back in jail by lunchtime. So, but anyway, that's where we've come from, keeping up with inmates in the county jail on 3x5 cards to the computerized databases and the criminal justice information system, which allows us to merge information systems from all over the state, and even now with the feds. It was a struggle getting that stuff accepted by the law enforcement community and others. Just like e-courts now, it has been a struggle for people to accept it. But the technology is just, it's made centuries worth of difference in how we handle things. And it's getting even more sophisticated and maybe even more problematic because of that, because you don't know if the product is the lawyers or the computers, always.
Oh, okay. But you mean like them using AI or
Yeah.
ChatGPT or?
Yeah. I participated in a WebEx call not long ago about the National Center for State Courts was trying to tell everybody how it was really going to be wonderful. But not everybody believes it's going to really be wonderful. We'll see.
Right. Well, we've been asking folks here, what role has mentorship played in your career? Be it you as a mentor or you as a mentee early in your career?
Well, as I said early in my life, I interacted with people who were involved in the law. One of whom is former Supreme Court Justice Lewis Meyer, who was the city solicitor in my hometown of Wilson, whose son is now a district court judge in Wake County. But Lewis, when I worked at the newspaper in my hometown from the time I was a sophomore in high school and even through college for a while, when I wasn't working at the Daily Tar Heel, worked for the newspaper, and Justice Meyer would come by my desk regularly and tell me I needed to do something else. And Judge Naomi Morris, who was the chief judge of the Court of Appeals, the first female judge of the Court of Appeals, I believe, and certainly the first female chief, was a big influence on me early on. And then I never had a mentor like Wildy, and he's a phenomenal person and a great guy. Plus, and he's a halfway decent fisherman too. So, yeah. But he was encouraged in everything I tried to do, for allowing me to go to law school at night, allowing me to start prosecuting cases as soon as I could practice during what used to be called the third-year practice rule. So, I mean, I had tried jury trials by the time I graduated from law school because yes, I mean, it takes a village to do that as well as to raise children. It's those people particularly, plus Wake County's we've been so lucky to have such good judges. Judge Bob Farmer, who I knew when he was in the legislature, and Judge Ed Preston before him or after him, before him. I'm sorry. After him, Don Stevens. I mean, all those people have been so helpful to me personally and professionally. They all want to see you succeed and want to be helpful.
And you, no doubt, have been a mentor too.
Well, one of my many jobs, there was a position that we sort of created in the DA's office called the Poobah. And the Poobah essentially was the misdemeanor unit chief. You know, we used to run 6 district courtrooms a day in the old courthouse doing traffic tickets. For at least 4 of them were involved in traffic work. And there's always a people's court, a victim-initiated kind of court, which we did at night one time, which was a lot of fun. And in juvenile court. I forgot the question.
You as a mentor.
So I was in charge of the misdemeanor unit. And so I would help or try to help train the new folks coming in, because coming out of law school, most people don't know a lot about court. They haven't had any experience in court. They haven't had to make decisions about whether to charge people or with what to charge people or what kind of pleas to take when they want to work out a deal. And that's a learned skill. That's not something you innately have, I don't think. I mean, you may innately have some good common sense, but decision-making in a courtroom setting is a little different kind of animal that you got to learn. So I did a lot of that. I had prosecuted all those cases that I thought I needed to prosecute, so I did more training than anything else, and that's been fun. And that's exactly what I did when I had my little break from when I retired to when I became an emergency judge. I think I'm the only person that ever was to Poobah twice. So that was fun, and it's interesting to see how it's a little interesting dynamic in interacting with people that are 40 years younger than you, than ones that only 5 years younger than you. So it was fun, and I think we've done some good. We've given the bar people like Judge Ashley Dunstan and people like that, Rashad Halter, and I think we've been successful at that.
Yeah, I was with you with Judge Hunter just the other day.
Yes, right.
At the Oysters. So I'm going to ask you about a memorable courtroom moment. What's something that sticks out to you as funny or impactful or dramatic or...
Well, I could write a book with a lot of stories that are not really appropriate for this forum, I don't think. But what I described to you about trying to get people out of jail to clean the jail up for the weekends, we called it Free the People Day. And some of my favorite stories come from that. One of our senior prosecutors at the time was a guy named Frank Jackson, and Frank and I would do Free the People Court on just about every Friday, and we got to know all the street people, So I'd go to the Y and run. I may get whistled at by some of the street people down on Hillsborough Street. But two stories that really stand out in my mind are one whose name was George Jordan, I think, maybe Wimpy was his nickname, but Wimpy used to, in the Village District, what's now the Village District, there was a grocery store called the Big Star. And Wimpy would go in the Big Star and steal a bottle of wine, and he'd get caught every time, and he'd end up in jail. And first time we did it, three of the people, we brought him in and said, if you want to plead guilty, we'll get you out of jail. And he said, well, I won't do that. And we said, okay, how do you plead to stealing the bottle of wine from the Big Star? He said, oh, I can't plead guilty to that. I said, why not? He said, I don't drink wine. And I said, well, what do you drink? He said, I don't drink anything but Jack Daniels. And I said, okay, I'll amend this warrant to say you stole a bottle of Jack Daniels out of the Big Star. How you plead to that? He said, oh, I plead guilty to that. The other time was the first Free the People Day of the new year, when one of the regular street people, whose name escapes me at the moment, stole a bottle of Dom Perignon from the Big Star. And so Frank Jackson asked him, and said, why on earth did you steal such an expensive bottle of champagne? He said, Mr. Jackson, price was no object. But those very funny moments, particularly in People's Court, we have great moments of humor, many of which are a little too blue to be broadcast to the world. But Judge Rader has been involved in a bunch of those. He can probably tell you more than I can.
Can you tell us about an ethical dilemma that you faced as an attorney at some point in your career?
Well, yes, I think everybody who's done any criminal law have faced those ethical issues, both in trying to present a side of the case that you weren't certain was the truth, or that where you really didn't trust your client, or what he had to tell you, or things of that nature. Everybody knows the ones where the client wants you to help him lie to the tribunal. That's pretty easy to figure out, but sometimes it's hard to determine where those lines are. As a defense lawyer, I kind of drew the line after a while at things I just wouldn't do, and but we've had lawyers, many who've said they would just go to jail rather than do what the client asked them to do. But anyway, but those things arise a lot. When you have clients that you know are going to lie or try to pursue a course of in a civil lawsuit or in a criminal action of want you to pursue a pathway of law that is not that's against what the evidence shows. That is you're kind of making stuff up, or you are going against what's pretty established precedent. Those are the kind of issues that are, get that. Why you have to zealously represent your client. If you're going to do that, you have to decline the representation when it goes over that line. And those are hard things for people to do, particularly struggling young lawyers who are trying to pay their overhead and make money for their family. It's sometimes a difficult job, but it's difficult in a lot of different situations.
You touched on some. It is a difficult profession, and it can be very stressful. And how did you manage that in your career? Be it the stress of taking on other people's problems, the stress of case management, the stress of all of that. How did you manage that, and what is your best advice?
I will, well, another way in which we have made advances in the law, what you were asking about before, is to focus on the work-life balance. People pay attention to that now. The old-time lawyers, the old time to me, didn't really care whether you were depressed or not, as long as you got the work done. And that's been an issue for a lot of different people. I found that to be prevalent in the big firm more than in the small firm with which I was personally familiar. But I tried to stay in shape. I tried to be physically active. I tried to keep an active social life. I think we learned during COVID, certainly, that social interaction is a big part of our mental health. And it's very collegial with lawyers and with colleagues when I was on the bench, and that helps a lot. Getting feedback from your colleagues and discussing it with them, and I still do that. I mean, I'll still try to have lunch with Judge Shirley and Judge Holt and people like that every chance I get. Judge Locke when I'm in Johnson County. And the older lawyers that are now aged out like me, I kind of learned from them that interacting with your colleagues and finding out that everybody has the same problems and just deals with them differently. So I didn't ever feel, I mean, obviously, it was a serious murder trial, and no matter which side I was on, defending or prosecuting or being the judge, people have their liberty at stake and sometimes their lives at stake, and that can give you some stress, but you have to, try to, it's a great saying that when you're up your ass in alligators, it's difficult to remember that your initial objective was to drain the swamp. You have to keep the big picture in mind. I had a great family, 2 wonderful kids, real active in their sports, and they're just. You can take your work seriously without taking yourself too seriously, and I think that most of the judges I've known who I thought were really good ones were that way. They didn't take themselves too seriously, and they had at least enough humility to be able to understand their place in the world and in the system. And so they were good examples.
So that leads me to my next question. You touched on it. Tell us about your life outside the law through your career right now.
Well, I still try to stay in reasonably good shape, but now I don't run 5 miles a day by myself. I run with my dog in the mornings, and I play golf a couple of days a week and play tennis a couple of days a week when I can. My children were spread out. Now at least one of them is back on the East Coast, but try to spend as much time with them as I can. I love to do anything outdoors, hunt, fish, sail. So I'll do all that I can, and try to work some. So when they call me, and I do a few other things that we're allowed to do as retired judges that we couldn't have done as judges, like do arbitrations. And I did some mediation, but I've taken my name off the mediation list because I don't think I'm very good at it. And we have people like Judge Osmond Smith and others who I think are much better at it than I am. So I don't do that anymore, but I do some arbitration and some insurance umpire work. I used to referee soccer, but I don't do that anymore either. So the demands are too great, I think.
And talk about the future of the profession. Where do you think the future of the legal community in Wake County is headed?
Oh, I don't know if it's just the Wake County, as we were talking about, the advent of artificial intelligence, and that kind of thing. It's going to be an interesting few years to see how people use or abuse that process. I think that, we talked about the legal deserts that are forming in rural areas of North Carolina. We really need to do something like that. It's, from my experience, it was the lawyers who were kind of the leaders of the communities in many of those rural areas where now they don't have any. They don't have any doctors either, but they have, central places they can go. Most of them have some regional facility, but they may not have any regional place to go for legal help. And the political climate in the last few years has been such that the chasm between the have and the have-nots seems to have grown, and so the need for free or reduced cost legal services has increased, and I think that will only increase more. It's become legal aid has been difficult for people without means to obtain probably forever, but in my lifetime it seems to have gotten worse. When this was a long time ago, that's why I said that was the longest period of my life when I was in a big firm. Is I don't see any reason to be a lawyer if you can't help your friends. And at the time, I didn't have many friends I could help at $300 an hour. So, and now the $300 an hour people are now $600 and $800 an hour and more. So that's the thing that concerns me, is the access to justice, the access to legal service, but from a geopolitical perspective and from a socioeconomic perspective.
And what is your best advice for new attorneys? People being sworn in 2025, what's your best advice for them?
As we were talking about before, social interaction with your peers, being a part of this bar association and the Young Lawyers Division, I don't think there's any substitute for that. When I first got involved with the legal system in Wake County, people were friendly to each other, and most everybody knew most everybody else. But now that we're the largest bar in the state, that's not true anymore. And when you went into court as the adversary of somebody you go to church with, or somebody you play golf with, or somebody you see at the grocery store every week, it's difficult to be difficult with that person. And I don't think we have as much of that anymore. And the bar association promotes that kind of interaction, and you'll take advantage of that at every opportunity. Plus, there's no such thing as free CLE unless you're a member of the bar association. You learn so much from your colleagues, not just about the legal profession, but about life. Never forget who you are and where you came from, and it represents some people pro bono from time to time, so that you don't always, so you get a feel for what people who are not of means, the problems that they face and the issues that they have and the perspectives they have on the world that you can change, maybe. But stay humble and stay engaged with people.